Hey coders, welcome to my channel and into the PHP based full stack web application series, which is about implementing real estate website. In our previous video, we connected our backend with the database and we brought in these featured properties dynamically. Now we are ready to work on to buy and to rent pages. But before that, we need to make some changes in the JavaScript such that when we click on any of these cards, we should be redirected to the page which has detailed information about this particular property. So let's start with that. For that, first of all, we have to go to the home.twig page, and over here with the listing div, we have to attach an event listener. So this is the div. Each property card that you see on the screen, it's being defined through this div. So we are going to attach an event listener with this div. So the event that we are interested in is click. So on click, now over here within the quotation marks, we have to define the event listener. Let's make it get property details. And because it's an event listener, so basically it's a function in JavaScript, therefore parenthesis. Now to this we have to pass in the parameter. So we want to pass in the unique ID of each property, because through that unique ID we can identify the property. So we are going to pass in this property ID, which is part of this object. So it's going to be a variable, so double curly brackets, and it's property dot property ID. Okay, so now we have to define this function within the JavaScript. So copy the name and let's go to the script.js file. Okay, there it is, script.js, and at the very end, let's define a function named get property details. And to this we are passing ID as a parameter. So whenever this function is triggered, we want us to be redirected to a different page, which is window.location.href. And over here we have to define the whole URL. So first of all, let's get the URL. So let's select this property one, copy this URL, and paste it over here. Now instead of this one, we are going to bring in a variable. So it's the ID, the parameter that has been passed. So this part is static. However, the ID will be changed for each property clicked, and this ID comes from the ID that has been passed as a parameter over here. Let's go back, refresh. Now let's click on this property. Nothing happened. Get property details is not defined on home page. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. I think earlier we were getting the cached data. That's why we got this error. However, once I refreshed it multiple times, so now we are being redirected to the appropriate property details page. Okay, so this part is done. Now I think we have one more thing to fix. Let's close this. If we go to this to rent page, or if we go to this to buy page, now if we click on this featured page, so we should be redirected first of all to the home page, and then we should be redirected on that page into the featured section. But instead what is happening is, let's click on this featured page. This featured part got attached to the current URL buy.html, and we don't have featured section on this page. So that means we have to fix our URLs in the header section. So if you remember, the header has been, so header is defined in the layout.twig file. So let's go there. Let's go up. Okay, so we have to fix things over here. Now everything which is hash based, we have to change it, because in the current state, this part gets attached to the current URL. However, we want it to get attached to the home page. Like this. So copy this and paste it over here. Okay, we don't want buy, we want home.html. And this one as well. Okay, let's refresh. Click on real estate. Okay, let's click on home. Okay, now we got redirected to the home page and hero section. Then featured, services. Now let's go to the to rent page and now again click on services and we got redirected to home.html and over there to the services section. Probably we have to fix this part as well. No, it's working fine. Okay. So that means that part is already fixed, I think. Okay, so now we are ready to move on to this rent part or to buy part. So logic is going to be same. We have to bring in the cards that we have defined for the featured section as well. These cards. So we basically have to simply kind of copy paste it, but we won't be copy pasting it. Instead we are going to extract this logic into something of a concept called macro in Twig. So twigs can be related to functions, a normal function, such that it could be executed to repeat the logic multiple times. However, there is a slight difference between a function and a macro. So basically, function can do execution, it can perform some calculation, and it can return us the result. While you can understand macro to be a collection of statements, and wherever you call the macro, you are basically pasting those list of lines into the code. So basically you are extracting the part of HTML into a separate component which could be called back multiple times to paste those statements of HTML back into the code. Whereas a programming based functions, when they are executed, they can perform computational tasks as well. So that's the difference at the highest level. Otherwise, at the understanding level, you can think of macro as a function. So anyways, we are going to extract the logic which defines this card into a macro because we are going to utilize the same logic on this page over here and on this to buy page over here. So instead of redefining that whole div that we just saw earlier, let's close this layout and script as well. So over here, so otherwise we have to define this whole div on other pages as well. So what we are going to do instead now is that we are going to extract this part into a separate macro. So starting div and the closing div. So everything in between, including these starting and closing divs, we are going to cut it from here. And now we are going to define a new file. First of all, in the views, let's define a new file called macros.twig. And over here, we are going to define a macro. So this macro over here requires the name. So let's call it card. And to that, we can pass parameters. So the parameter is going to be property. And let's paste back the logic, the div that we cut from our home.twig. So now every time this macro is called, this div gets pasted at that place. And because we have kept the name of the parameter same as we have over here, so we don't need to make any changes over here. Just save this macro. Close it. Now let's go back to the home.twig and over here where earlier we had this whole div. Now we are going to, let's come out of this div. First of all, we have to import this macro. So now we can import whole file, that is macros.twig, or we can import individual macros from it. So currently we only have one macro, but still we are going to include that macro explicitly because later on we might need to define more macros. So we don't want all of those macros to be part of different views even when we don't need them. We don't want to do that. Therefore, we are going to individually import specific macros that we currently need. Okay, so for that we are going to say from. Now over here within these quotations, we have to define the name of the template. So the name of the template is macros.twig. Macros.twig, and we are going to import one specific macro. However, if you notice, this macro name is within the quotations. So we have to remove it out of those quotations and we have to just mention the name of the specific macro that we are interested in. And we are interested in the card macro. But we don't have to enclose it within the quotations. And otherwise, this macro will not be imported. Okay, so now we have this card macro. Now we are coming back into this for each loop where we earlier had the whole div, the listing div. So now over here we are going to call that macro which is card, and to that we are going to pass in this property as a parameter. That's it. We don't have to do anything else. Now this card macro will insert this whole div each time this for loop is executed, but each time the property data will be different. So let's see if it works. So let's go to the home page, featured. Okay, let's click on this one. Okay, we got redirected to property 7. Since we are still able to see the cards, that means the macro is working fine. Now we are ready to move on to this to buy and to rent properties. So we have to remove these as well. So let's start with removing these static cards first. Let's go to rent.twig, and since we don't need this div in the listing container, we don't need this div. So This is one listing, this is second listing, and this is third listing. Okay. Delete it. And we have this listing div, listing container div, which is empty at the moment. Then we have this div, the closing div, which, what does this closing div match with? Is this an extra div? Okay, this is properties section, closing section. Then this is search div, closing div. Then we have this container, sort div, container div. Then container listing. Yeah, this was an extra div. Let's have a peek. Refresh. Okay. Yeah, everything is working fine. Okay. Now what we need to do is that first of all, we have to go to the database.php file and define the logic for bringing in only properties which are available in the market to be rented out. So for that, we have to basically define another function or method because we are in a class. So public function, let's give it the name getProperties. We might need a parameter over here, but let's go to the body, leave this empty for the time being, and let's try to understand the query that we need to execute. Now, if we look at this previous query that we built for the featured properties, this query is going to serve our needs for to buy and to rent properties as well. We just have to make slight modifications. And those slight modifications are, we are no longer interested in featured properties, so we are going to remove this part. We have to remove this and as well. Okay. So we still need to just see the properties which are currently available in the market. So we are going to keep this status equals available. But now we have to define another condition, which is only going to filter us the properties which are available in the market for the renting purposes. So therefore, what we are going to do is, let's go to this properties page. We are going to target this listing type, which says for sale or rental. So we are going to say and p dot listing type equals, currently we are working on the rental one, so rental. That's it. That's the only change that we have to make over here. But okay, we were not supposed to make this change in the get featured property. So I'm going to copy this part, copy, paste it over here, and let's go back and revert the changes. So we don't need this rental. Let's put back p dot is featured equals true. Okay, so this was our get featured method. Now let's go back to the get properties method. Okay, so now let's look at this get properties method. Now, if you notice, when we will work on the to buy properties, the only change that we have to make over here is we have to look for properties whose listing type is for sale. The only change which is happening is this part over here. So what we are going to do is that we are going to extract this part out and we are going to pass this as a parameter. This way, this get properties method will work for both to buy and to rent properties. So we will not have to define separate functions for those properties. So what we are going to do is that we are going to pass two parameters. Let's give them name key and value. So over here, what we are going to do is that we are going to say where p dot key equals colon value. So now we will be using prepared statements. So what we are going to do is that after the statement, we are going to say, sorry, after this query, we are going to say this query, let's prepare it. So prepare the query, then we are going to execute this statement by calling execute method. And we are going to pass an array which is going to provide all the values for these placeholders. So the name that we have given over here is value. So value, and its value is going to come from this variable value. So copy and paste. Since we only have one placeholder, so we are only going to pass this one. So the only thing that we have to make sure is this name matches this name over here. If we had the name value 1 over here, then we would have to write value 1 over here as well. Okay, so this gets executed. then we are returning this data based on if we receive PD or statement object or we receive the data. Okay, so now we should be ready to see all the data that belongs to the properties which are available in the market to be rented out. So now let's go to our controller. So this is rent controller. We have to make some changes over here. So let's go to the home controller. We are going to copy this use statement for the database class, and let's go to the rent controller, paste it over here. Now we also need, what did we have in the home controller? We had this private method db, and we also need this constructor. So copy in the rent class, paste this over here. Now in the index method, so now through this constructor, we are creating an instance of database which gets stored in this private property. Now within this index method, we have to call this statement that we have defined in the index method of home controller. We are going to paste it in the index method of rent controller. However, the method that we are interested in is not get featured, but get properties. And to this we have to pass in the parameters, 2 parameters. So the name of the key was listing type, and the value is going to be over here. It's going to be rental. So this time we are calling the method get properties on the db object, and whatever we get, we are storing it in this data variable, and now we are going to pass this data to our rent.twig page. So we have to pass it as an array, otherwise we will encounter the same error that we received last time. So data and the value is going to be variable data. Okay, so now let's go to the rent one, rent.twig. And over here in the listing container, we are going to, let's close this database and home controller. Let's go to this home.twig and copy this part. So we are importing the card macro. Then we are using this for loop to iterate over this data object, and we are inserting the card property. So copy this part. Let's go back to the rent.twig and paste it over here. And I think everything is sorted out. Save it once more, and now let's go to the browser. Let's refresh. Okay, so we got all the properties. They are all to be rented out. That's why they are all red over here. And if you see at the bottom, it shows the rent over here as well. So if you notice, all of them are available to be rented out. Now we have to do the same for the to buy as well. So what we are going to do is that the first thing that we are going to do is that let's copy this whole thing. Do we need the whole thing? I think we should define another macro for this search div and the sort div as well. So basically this search div and this sort div, because it's available on the to buy and to rent, it's available at 2 places. So we need to extract this in a macro as well. Anyway, let's not worry about that yet. Let's go back to the rent, and what do we need to make changes over here? Okay, so I think we should just copy this part. Copy. Okay, I think our rent, yeah, let's go to the buy, and we have one extra div, so we should remove that div as well. Comment this out. Okay, and now first of all, this is one listing div. It ends over here. Then second div starts, listing div, it ends over here. Third listing div starts and it ends over here. So delete everything. So this is the closing div for this listing container, and we are going to paste everything over here. So paste, save. Let's go to the buy, refresh. Okay, it won't work because currently the buy controller does not have the logic. So let's go to the buy controller. Now we have to do the same thing over here as well, which is let's go to the rent controller. We have to use this database class. Paste it over here, and then again let's go and copy this part. So the property, private property, and the constructor. Let's go to the buy and paste it over here. Now in the index method, what we need to do is let's copy this part. Let's go to the buy and paste it over here. Now for the listing type, from renter we have to change it to for sale. and we have to pass this on to the Twig page. Okay, so hopefully everything is sorted out now. Let's refresh, and we get all the properties which are available to be sold. Okay, so this part is also done. Now we have to work on this search form and this sort by form, and as well as we have to work on, when we click on the individual properties, we want to see the data related to that property over here as well. We will cover this thing in the next video. In the meantime, what I want you to try to convert these two things into macros as well. So in the next part, we will not only convert these two into macros, and we will also define the logic which will display these pages or bring these pages according to the location, bedroom, number of bedrooms, or minimum value, max value, and then we can sort them out over here according to the price, high, low, or number of bedrooms, high or low. So that part we will done in the next video. I hope you like this video. If you did, please do not forget to comment, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much. Happy coding.